Welcome in, Minnesota sports fans, to another edition of Vikings on SI right here on the Bring Me the Sports YouTube channel. Jonathan Hairston joined once again by Will Ragatz. Will, it's another Thursday, another 5 matches Thursday, so let's jump right into it. A big matchup for the Vikings this weekend. The border battle is on. 3-0 Vikings taking on the 2-1 Packers in Lambeau. For once, an early season game in Lambeau, so that should help weather-wise anyways. So let's jump right into it. First matchup, the biggest matchup that will decide this weekend's game between the Vikings and Packers.
Yeah, I am going to start with one that we haven't seen in a couple of years. It's Justin Jefferson against Jair Alexander. And this is about as fun as it can get with individual matchups, wide receiver, cornerback. Justin Jefferson obviously is, and I think the general opinion, and certainly my opinion, the best wide receiver in football with, the career that he's put together in his 5th season. Off to another great start. He's top 5 in receiving yards this year. Hit the ground running with Sam Darnold. And then Jair Alexander is really a very talented cornerback. I think he gets under the skin of a lot of Vikings fans, and they may not like him very much, but he's a very good player. I don't think he's necessarily quite on Justin Jefferson's level, but he certainly seems to think he is, which is a good trait that cornerbacks should have, which is to have a little bit of that irrational confidence. And so the last time we saw this matchup actually was January 2023, the end of the 2022 season, when the Vikings went there with Kirk Cousins. And I believe that was the game they were slipping around all over the field. They weren't wearing the right cleats. And Kevin O'Connell was annoyed by that. They lost 41-17. Jefferson had 1 catch for 15 yards, basically the worst game of his entire career. Jair Alexander, after an incomplete pass, literally grittied on him. So it was about as bad as it's gotten for Jefferson. And then last year, we didn't see it because Jefferson missed the game early in the season in Minneapolis with his injury. And then when the Vikings went to Lambeau and Jaron Hall got the start, Jefferson was playing, but Alexander wasn't. So this will be our first time seeing this matchup since that gritty. And I imagine Jefferson has some things in store for Alexander if he's able to get him back, which I think he might just be able to.
Yeah, 3 touchdowns through 3 games so far for Jefferson. He's been on a great start for his season, and I'm looking forward to that. As you mentioned, I think that's a great point for Jefferson not being able to get back at Jair Alexander for an entire year, just having that fester. And a guy like Jefferson who kind of uses those as motivations quite a bit. I think he'll have a big game this weekend. All right, number 2 for you.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say on that one, you mentioned the 3 straight touchdowns. Randy Moss has the Vikings record with 5 straight touchdowns to open the 2004 season. Nobody else has even done it 4 times. So both Jefferson and Jalen Naylor could move into sole possession or a tie for second place if they can get another touchdown here. My second matchup, we're going to stay on the same side of the ball for the first few of these. It's just Aaron Jones going against the Packers in the revenge game. And I know it's something we talk about seemingly every week in the NFL with all the player movement, but this one's going to hit a little different than even maybe any of the Vikings-Texans revenge games last week. Maybe the Danielle Hunter thing, but I mean, Aaron Jones, through his 7 years with the Packers, was really like a beloved fan favorite in that organization, and one of the better running backs that they've ever had. Just a super productive player, a Pro Bowler. A part of some very, very good, 13-win NFC Championship teams. And then the way that it kind of went down this offseason where they just moved on and they signed Josh Jacobs and they made a business decision. And then Aaron Jones ends up happening to sign with one of their biggest rivals and has really hit the ground running with the Vikings and has become everything for the Vikings organization and the Vikings fan base that he was in Green Bay. The team loves him, the players, coaches, the fans are starting to love him. He's really kind of fixed the Vikings running game that was so poor over the last couple of years. He's just been incredible. He's top 5 in the league in yards from scrimmage across all skill players through 3 weeks, playing really well. And he said on Wednesday, we talked to him, and he said he's got nothing but love for the Packers. Some fans have given him a hard time for coming to the Vikings, and he's really leaned into it with the Skull chant and all those things. But he posted a piece in the Players Tribune, and it was cool to see the overwhelmingly positive response to that from Packers fans. And Jones was talking about how they really believed in him, and not a lot of people did when he was coming up. And he went to UTEP and was a 5th-round pick, and the Packers really believed in him. And so that's pretty cool. I think it'll be a really cool kind of emotional full circle moment for Jones to go back to Lambeau Field and play there. But he wants to beat him. He wants to score a touchdown, and he wants to do the Lambeau leap. He said he's definitely leaping if he scores, and he's going to try to find some Vikings fans in the front row. But from listening to him talk, you get the sense, even if he doesn't find any purple, he's just going to leap up into some Packers fans and hope they don't push him down too quickly. So it should be fun to watch Jones go against his old team on Sunday.
For sure, and I think you mentioned it there, is that it feels like for the first time under Kevin O'Connell, this team has a legitimate running game because of the way Aaron Jones plays, and it just feels well balanced for the first time under Kevin O'Connell, and that's a dangerous weapon for an already near elite, if not elite, passing attack to have that threat of a really, really good running game, it feels like. And it'll be a big test for the Vikings for sure. Green Bay come into the weekend 10th in rushing yards allowed this season. Minnesota 2nd in rushing yards allowed. So two very good run-stopping defenses. Though, granted, Minnesota has put teams behind quite a bit, so they've had to pass quite a bit. So that number's a little bit skewed for Minnesota, for sure. But this game against Green Bay will have quite a bit of running, I'm sure, depending on how this quarterback situation plays out for the Packers. But once again, really nice to have a well-balanced rushing attack, or overall offensive attack for the Vikings. What's your number 3 matchup for this weekend?
Yeah, I've got one more on this side of the ball, and it's something we talk about a lot, but I'm going to go with the interior of the Vikings offensive line because
big test.
You really have to. And, Garrett Bradbury, Ed Ingram, if you can point to one weakness on the Vikings offense, I mean, year over year, but especially this year where everything else has really been functioning well. I mean, even the tackles have been great. Even Blake Brandel at left guard has stepped in well. It's just been the Bradbury and Ingram thing. And I will say as well that Bradbury didn't practice on Wednesday. It was an estimation that he didn't practice because they just had a walkthrough. But he's dealing with an ankle injury, which is different than the knee injury he was previously listed with on the injury report. So if he were somehow to not go, it'd be Dan Feeney, and then this would be a lot more scary because the big thing here, the Packers' 2 leaders in pressures on defense, it's not Rashawn Gary or Preston Smith off the edge, who we all know. They've been there for a while. It's Devontae Wyatt and Kenny Clark. They're 2 defensive tackles. Wyatt's got 9 pressures. Clark's got 7. Those are the top 2 kind of pass rushers for Green Bay so far. And that's not a ton of pressures, but they're getting a few a game, and the Vikings are going to need to be they're going to need to play well, and they're going to need to have Bradbury or Feeney or whoever's playing center, and then have Ingram play well as well, because we know, I mean, Sam Darnold has handled pressure fairly well so far. He's been pressured nearly 40% of the time, which is a higher rate than the Vikings would like, but he's handled that well. He hasn't made a lot of really bad decisions that have kind of swung the tide of games. He's been able to throw the ball away or find his hot read or scramble a little bit. But you don't want to keep putting him in those situations over and over and over, especially with interior pressure, where it can be harder to escape. Because if you're trying to escape interior pressure and then maybe Darisaw or O'Neal aren't perfect against Gary and Preston Smith, that's when pockets start to collapse and things can start to go awry. So again, it's going to be a frequent thing that we look at with the interior of the Vikings offensive line, but especially when you're going against guys like Kenny Clark and Devontae Wyatt this weekend.
Yeah, Kenny Clark has had the Vikings number, has had Garrett Bradbury's number in particular. 8 sacks in 16 career games against the Vikings. That is an incredible output against one team. Just a ridiculous output for Kenny Clark against the Vikings. And we mentioned it earlier in this year, but with the way Ed Ingram has played and with Dalton Risner sitting there on the injured reserve, I think he can come back. He can start to come back next week if I'm remembering the rules correctly. But that return could be soon. And I know you mentioned it yesterday that the team seems to like Ed Ingram and what he provides in the run blocking game. But if it's another bad game, you got to think that there's that pressure to start putting in Dalton Risner in certain aspects of that right guard spot if Ed Ingram continues to show a lack of improvement.
Yeah, I think we talked about this even before the season. Like, All right, if Reisner's going on short-term IR, that means eligible to return week 5. Ed Ingram, you got 4 games, maybe
Yeah.
maybe 5, with the week 6 bye and however Reisner's doing, to prove that you deserve to keep this job. And I think he's mostly done that. And I know like Vikings fans might not love to hear that. I just think from turning on the tape, it's been the run blocking stuff has been really good, and I don't want to discount that when we talk about Aaron Jones and how
Mhm.
good he's been. Like Ed Ingram deserves a little credit for that. If you go watch the 39-yard run that Jones had last week against the Texans, which by the way was longer than any run the Vikings had all of last season,
Ooh.
Ed Ingram makes a really impressive block to open up that hole, and CJ Ham, Brian O'Neill, a bunch of other guys were key in that play, but it was Ingram that they were kind of running right by. So, with that said, the pass protection thing still also really matters because that can be catastrophic if you're getting beaten quickly in your one-on-one matchup there, and that's happened a few times with Ed Ingram for sure. So, yeah, he's still this week, maybe next week in London as well. Still has some things to prove if he's going to hold on to that spot because Reisner gives you at least he's not the same run blocker for sure, but he gives you a floor in pass protection.
Yeah, absolutely, and that will be one that many Vikings fans will be watching intently, playing and play out on offense. All right, number 4 for you.
All right, we're gonna switch over to the other side of the ball, and we'll go with the Vikings' leading pass rusher here, which is Jonathan Grenard. He's got 17 pressures. He's tied for I think 5th in the league in pressures. Tied for the Vikings team lead in sacks with Pat Jones with 4. Coming off a huge game against the Texans, he lines up about 68% of the time on the left side of the defense, which is to say the right side of the offense. So he'll be going against somebody who's actually been the Packers' best offensive lineman, which is Zach Tom, their right tackle. He's got a really strong 78.4 PFF grade, 84.2 as a pass blocker. Not somebody that maybe a lot of people have heard of, but he hasn't allowed a sack or a pressure this entire year at right tackle. So according to PFF. So not a single pressure. I actually didn't know that until I looked it up right now as I was speaking. But Jonathan Grenard, that is going to be a big matchup for him because we know how good Grenard is. But to go against a guy who's been kind of pitching a clean sheet so far, that'll be one to watch when the Vikings are on defense. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of players to watch on the Vikings defense, as we know. Andrew Van Ginkel, Pat Jones, a lot of guys up front. But Grenard's been their best pass rusher, and if the Vikings are going to have success against whoever is playing quarterback for the Packers, and I'll get into that a little more in my next one, it's going to have to start with number 58 coming around the edge.
Yeah, Grenard having 3 sacks against his former team in the Texans last week, a monster game for him. But as we all expected, Patrick Jones tied for the team lead at this point in the season for sacks. What does that say about Brian Flores' ability to just be able to work in all these different players into roles that really help them excel?
Yeah, it's I think one of the best things that Flores does. I mean, we know about the crazy schematics and the disguise and all of the complexity of the game plans that he brings every week. But I think something I saw from Flores even last year is just his ability to put guys in positions to succeed. I think is really impressive. He learns his players and what they have, and he did that last year, coming in with a lot of players that he had no impact in picking or signing or whatever. Just guys who were already here. He learned them, learned what they did well, and then so many guys last year really had just breakout career years. I mean, Josh Metellus just thrived under Flores, and he put Ivan Pace Jr. in lots of great spots to have a huge rookie year, and Daniil Hunter had a career high in sacks. So I think that's a really good thing that Flores does, and Pat Jones is a good example of that. How the way he's been able to thrive amidst the broader picture of this chaotic Vikings defense so far. I don't think Pat Jones is going to end up with 15 sacks or something this season. His 4 through 2 weeks was a little bit of a surprise, but he could end up with 8 to 10 probably, just with the way that this Vikings defense plays as a whole. And I think we could see all 3 guys, Grenard, Van Ginkel, Pat Jones, perhaps threaten double digits. I think Grenard and Van Ginkel will almost certainly get there. Pat Jones, more of a maybe.
Yeah. Another one of those pass rushers, Dallas Turner, missed last week. What's his status coming into this weekend? I know it's only Thursday, so plenty to still could still change. But what have Kevin O'Connell and the coaching staff been saying about his status for this weekend's game?
Yeah, on Monday, O'Connell just said that he was hopeful about all three guys that they didn't have last week, which was Dallas Turner, Ivan Pace Jr., and Jordan Addison. And then I believe on Tuesday on like K-Fan, he said that they should get Dallas Turner back. And that was what Turner said in the locker room last week is, he's going to miss this Texans game, but the hope was just miss one game. So I think Turner is tracking fairly well to play. It was encouraging that he was estimated as a limited participant on Wednesday, the first practice of the week. And Jordan Addison was estimated as limited as well, so he could be making his return after missing 2 games. Less clear on Pace, who was listed as a DNP with his ankle injury. So it could be another week with a lot of Blake Cashman and then some Kamu Grugier-Hill as well if Ivan Pace Jr. can't play. And that's like another guy, the testament to this Vikings defense.
Yeah.
Grugier-Hill has just been a special teamer. I mean, a real true backup linebacker, but he's played a ton of football, and he comes in last week and he gets an interception on the second play of the game and really was flying around and nearly had a forced fumble in that same quarter. So just the depth and the versatility and the experience of this defense, even when a guy goes down, there's somebody else ready to step in.
For sure. Number 5, the 5th matchup you'll be watching that will decide this weekend's game.
Yeah, so I do this. I think I've probably done this every week now, but it's just Brian Flores against the opposing quarterback or play caller or the combination of the two. It's just, I have to do it. It's fascinating. I'm going specifically with Flores against Matt LaFleur in this game because Matt LaFleur, I think Vikings fans maybe appreciate, maybe don't. Just he is one of the brightest offensive minds in this game. And we talk about how the Vikings have that and Kevin O'Connell. The Packers have that too in LaFleur, who's another guy from that whole Shanahan-McVay tree. And I mean, Brian Flores talked about it this week. The way that he's been able to pivot from what they do with Jordan Love and how they were so successful with that last year to going 2-0, admittedly against a couple bad teams, with Malik Willis running a ton of like mobile quarterback Lamar Jackson stuff, RPO, zone read option, like all these different things where they've set Willis up to play really well. And he hasn't thrown for a ton of yards. It's a little over 300 in those 2 games, but he had several completions of 30 plus yards last week. He ran for a touchdown. He's been using his legs really effectively, and their game plans worked really well to get those 2 wins. So to me, it's going to be just another fascinating chess match. The Flores thing, people are around the world, around the NFL world, are starting to take notice of how unbelievably successful this Vikings defense has been, and how just the chaos and deception that we keep talking about, and how they line 8 guys up at the line of scrimmage and present this look, and then drop 4 of them back into coverage, and it's a totally different look, and just the quarterbacks have so much to figure out both pre and post snap that it's just a big reason why the Vikings have been so successful. So LaFleur is a very, very smart offensive coach. He's going to come into this thing watching all the film from the first 3 weeks on Flores, having a plan for how he wants to attack it, trying to set whoever is playing quarterback up to be able to diagnose what the Vikings are doing. But you know what? Flores is going to come in with some brand new tricks that nobody's seen, I'm sure. So whether it's Jordan Love, which my expectation is Jordan Love's going to be at quarterback at maybe slightly less than 100% for the Packers. But if you're banged up at all, that's something that these Vikings defensive sharks or hyenas are gonna prey on. It's still possible it could be Malik Willis as well, which would then be a totally different kind of plan and schematic matchup. But whoever's out there, it's the Flores-LaFleur matchup is, I think, going to be a really fun one.
Yeah, absolutely. And Flores said earlier this week in some kind of pretty telling comments about LaFleur and how he feels about him, said that he doesn't think what LaFleur's doing is getting talked about enough. Said that because of the 2 different quarterbacks and the 2 different ways they play, that they're basically preparing 2 different play sheets for this game. And it tells you how much he's preparing and how much he's it feels like he's kind of looking forward to this chess match between these two teams, and that's going to be really fun to watch, to see how this Vikings defense that has been so highly touted and praised through the first 3 weeks of the season will go up against a very different looking Green Bay offense, depending on who the quarterback is. It's certainly going to be fun. Well, good stuff.
Yeah, I mean
today.
the Packers. Sorry to cut you off. The Packers have like whoever's playing quarterback. I mean, they might know. I think the Packers like fairly soon. I don't know how much of it is going to be determined by how Love does throughout the week. Probably some of it, but I would imagine whenever they might know, I don't think the Vikings or the public are going to know until Sunday morning. So just to kind of preserve that little potential advantage where you make the Vikings prepare for two. But whoever is at quarterback, and I do expect it to be Love. I mean, this Packers team with Josh Jacobs, their backup running back, Emmanuel Wilson, scored a touchdown. They've got Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed. There's another receiver in there that I'm forgetting. They have a lot of weapons, so they're going to be a tough matchup for the Vikings, especially if Love is able to return.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this one for certain. Will, good stuff from you today. We'll talk to you later on in the week. I mean, we got our predictions tomorrow, so I'm sure Joe will predict another double-digit blowout win for the Vikings in Green Bay. So tune into that one right back here on the Bring Me the Sports YouTube channel. Go read all of Will's work over at Vikings, Twins, Gophers, and Timberwolves on SI, and the rest of the Bring Me the Sports teams work over on those websites as well.